Well, good afternoon if you are in New York City or places all along the eastern part of North, Central, and South America. Good morning to people further west. Good evening to people in the United Kingdom, in Portugal, and that time zone, and hello to people in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, especially people in Messina, Sicily, where my guest is from today. And as always, to our beloved ones in Ukraine, we are with you. Stay strong. Keep up the good fight, and we are here behind you. Welcome to Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. As you know, Adagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to music lovers all around the world. Regular visitors to this program, which is now more than 150 shows into its series, know that I have people on, some of them close friends, some of them people I know professionally, some of them I scarcely know. All of them, the common denominator is that they inspire me in one way or another. And that's how you get on this show. And my guest today is someone I've known for quite a while. We have a fair amount in common. He inspires me greatly on many different levels. His name is Roberto Scarcella Perino. How's that for an accent, Roberto?
Perfect.
Perfetto. And Roberto is from Messina in Sicily, but I know him in New York primarily. Roberto is a composer, a conductor, a professor, a fabulous chef. Not everybody who does those musical things and those academic things can cook at the level that Roberto cooks. So good is he that he also teaches culinary history at the Casa Italiana Zerilli Marimo of the New York University. I'm speaking in Italian now, of New York University in New York City. Roberto is on faculty there. I have led an opera series there since 2009 that people can find by searching Adventures in Italian Opera. Roberto was my only guest during the pandemic because no outsiders had access to come in to New York University, but Roberto was on staff. I had to go through all kinds of testing to get in, and I got in. And we sat in front of a basically empty auditorium. Just a few faculty and students were there, but not the full house that I usually get. So this is a different kind of conversation. First of all, Roberto, welcome. It's good to see you.
And thank you, Fred, for having me here. Yes, I remember perfectly the interview we had with a mask. So now, everybody prefer to show the face finally as a liberation of everything. Yes, thank you for having me. I can tell, that many things that I do, for sure, I always connect the cooking with the music. You make something that is joyful to people, like music and like food. You share something that is coming from your heart, and also you mix ingredients that sometimes food, sometimes like colors of instruments of just the notes to create a final product. So they have something in common. So I'm not ashamed to say that I do both in the same way.
So when you cook, and you are an outstanding cook, I don't want to just say that you're an Italian guy and therefore you know how to make pasta, but you are an outstanding cook. When you bring your talents to the kitchen, do you think in terms of notes and contrast and colors and textures and things that may appear in music?
It is the same concept. Of course, the nature is different because you have sweet and sour and another part of the taste, but the music is kind of the same. So you have to mix dissonance with consonance. Also, when you mix, when you do the orchestration, that is my passion to do orchestra, you have to be good with ingredients. You cannot put too much brass like when you have a solo string. So you have to combine the taste in a different way. So yes, it's measure. and is balanced. And the same, you know, with music and with food is the same. If you want to shock, of course, the audience, you will have something like really shocking, like Shostakovich used to be, you know, like putting the trombone with a ottavino or the piccolo.
Yeah.
So if I want to do that in the kitchen, I can do that the same. So yes, there is something in common for sure. Yeah.
Can one think in terms of major and minor keys, in terms of chord structures, things like that? And I'm not joking here, because let's not pretend, I'm a really good Italian cook too. I've written many
I know,
books.
yeah.
And one thing that I've learned is that a lot of the ingredients that go together, I'm thinking of the food of Bologna right now, where I went to university, as you did, and we'll talk about that. The food of Bologna is often about synthesis of many ingredients and slow cooking. Whereas where you're from in Sicily, there is some slow cooking, but a lot of it is about the freshness, the vibrancy of the primary materials that you have. So the eggplants, the peppers, the tuna, whatever it is, you taste it in as close to its natural state. So that, you know, maybe there are more soloists in a Sicilian dish, and maybe there's a more chamber music thing in a Bolognese dish.
There are Italian food, as you know, is more about the ingredients. So sometimes the best dishes are made with few ingredients. So what you are saying is right. Maybe there are more soloists playing there. And about the major and minor is all regional food. So also my music is regional many times. And sometimes I want to inspire myself by Sicilian songs, and I do the same when I cook. When I cook something, I always have too much citrus, too much flavors that are more Sicilian. So the same when I write my music, always there is something that remind the taste of Sicily.
Well, because I've not yet had a guest on this program from Messina in Sicily. It's a very important city, but not the first city that people name in Sicily. They will say Palermo, Catania, Siracusa, maybe Agrigento, maybe Trapani. But Messina is a very important city at a key place geographically, historically. Talk about Messina, where it is and what it faces.
Is the northern part of Sicily, is in the point of Sicily. So there are two seas, the Ionic Sea and the Tyrrhenian Sea, that they meet in the Stretto di Messina, the strait. So all the part around Messina is one of the most beautiful parts in all over Sicily, and all Sicilian they say that because of the view, the sense of sea of an island is maybe the best city in Sicily that has the sense of island, more than Palermo, than Catania, because you can see the sea from everywhere in the city. It was super, super rich in the past, before an earthquake that arrived in 1908. And it was a very important port. So there are lots of connection with many cities like Genoa and Venice. They were all passing from Messina. And for sure was very rich in the past. So we from Messina, we live with this idea of the past as one of the richest cities in the southern Italy. And but still now there is a kind of we want to have our own important moment in Sicily as well. There are few journalists that I met also in Messina that want to start to show to everybody the riches of the city, because we have an important museum. We have also the cathedral that has one of the most famous organ in the city. musically also, and very technological campanile. So the bell tower is
Bell
very, very
tower.
famous. So there are also some medieval churches that survived from the earthquake, and the weather is the best in the world because it's always windy. You have fresh air. You have this. You smell the sea from everywhere. The food is incredible. So I want to sell my city in this moment.
Well, I can tell,
It's
but
really
there's also a theater. Is it Savio or Savio?
Teatro Savio, yes.
Savio,
And there is also Teatro Vittorio Emanuele, that is the opera. It's very important because during the earthquake in 1908, it was December 28, there was the performance of Aida performing that night of the earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
And not during the performance, but there were lots of singers, artists coming to play the Aida, and then lots of they died because of the performance of Aida. So the earthquake was really, really big. And but also we speak about the performance of Aida. It looks like the Titanic in a way, that the music was the Aida was like the soundtrack of this kind of tragedies there.
Well, when I'm in Messina and people talk about Il Terremoto, the earthquake,
yes,
we know it means 1908. It's kind of like in San Francisco, despite all the earthquakes have been there, it's always 1906. And you may not know that there's something that Messina and San Francisco have in common, or many things, but one of them is that the Metropolitan Opera was playing in San Francisco the night of the earthquake. And it was on tour, and most of its sets were destroyed. And one of the singers there was Enrico Caruso. And Caruso hired a rowboat, and someone took him across to the East Bay from San Francisco. But Caruso did many drawings of San Francisco under the earthquake. And they're a very precious document of what that was about. Now, the thing is, Caruso fled. There was an Italian woman singer, Luisa Tetrazzini, who was very robusta. She was a big lady. And she said, no, forgive me for the accent, but she famously spoke in like a Macaronico accent. No, I stay, I cook, I take care of everybody. So what she did was, on Market Street in San Francisco, they brought food, and Luisa Tetrazzini put on a big apron, this big opera diva, and cooked for people in San Francisco. And many dishes are known as turkey tetrazzini, different things that she invented in San Francisco during the earthquake, that basically, if you had mushrooms and cream and sherry and turkey, that became turkey tetrazzini. And all of that was because of the San Francisco earthquake. Now, unfortunately,
she was a mama for sure.
She was a mama. She really was that.
Yeah.
And it's always held up in contrast that Caruso, yes, he did the drawings, but he got out of there. Tetrazzini stayed. She was a one-woman Red Cross, and she cooked. And because what happened in San Francisco, yes, it was damaged from the earthquakes, but it was the fires after that devastated the city. She stayed. She cooked. And it's a very important legacy, and people in San Francisco who know their opera, it's a wonderful opera city. Merola an Italian, founded the opera in 1923 in San Francisco. We know that story as well. So, but I want to get back to Messina for a very particular reason. It's because geographically it is where it is, sort of at the northeastern tip of Sicily, in a triangular island. It faces the Italian mainland. It faces the toe of the Italian boot. It faces Calabria. That strait right there, which is called the Strait of Messina, all the Greek heroes passed through there. There were two very famous bronze sculptures there called the Bronzo di Riace.
And there are many legends connected to the Strait of Messina.
Scylla and Charybdis.
Yes, Scylla Charybdis for sure.
Yeah.
And the Strait of Messina is super, super deep. For this reason, it's kind of connected with San Francisco in a way. That is like super, super deep, the area. It's just a few miles, so it's 3 kilometers, so 3 kilometers from the island to the city of Reggio Calabria. So there's the part of Italy. And there are lots of currents and vortex inside of the street. So it's not easy, first of all, to build a bridge because of this, because it's very windy and also the area, but also to navigate. So the Greeks were terrified whenever they were crossing the Strait di Messina. They were, they were afraid to be attacked by these monsters that are like the vortex.
Mhm.
And there are few legends. One of the most famous is Colapesce. Colapesce is the story of this man, this half man, a half fish, so it's kind of a merman. And Colapesce saved the city of Messina because the legend was saying that the city of Messina was built on a column that because of the earthquake was destroyed. And this man sacrificed himself holding the column of Messina. So still actually the hero is protecting all the people over Messina because it's holding us like that. Colapesce, I know very well because I wrote a ballet about this Colapesce. And it's all about the music, it's all oceanic music and music connected with the water. But many legends are for sure in that Greek area. It's like, close to Taormina that we know, where is the theater. And it's beautiful, to grow up with these stories all around us.
But that's really, I guess, the point I'm after. And I do want to say parenthetically that the first time I went to Sicily 45 years ago, I took a very long, slow train down from Bologna to Rome to Naples to
So you
Reggio
had to cross
Calabria. And then the train went on a sort of ferry. And the ferry floated across with the train from Reggio Calabria to Messina. And then the train got off in Messina. And that to me was magical, that in these currents and waves and everything, a ferry with a railway train could float across. And part of what I'm getting to here is, Roberto, when I said that you grew up in a very special spot, even in Sicily, it's connected to the outside world in ways that a lot of Sicily is not, frankly. Sicily can be very internal, very focused on just
we are. The problem for Sicily is the train. We cannot take the train go to Rome like that. Only people from Messina can do that because we take the aliscafo, that is the ferry, the quick ferry. We go to Reggio Calabria, we can take a train to go to Rome.
Right.
But if you are from Palermo, you have to take the train and then you have to cross with this long way the sea. So we are lucky in a way, but still in Messina, there is not an airport.
Yes.
The airport are in Catania, in Palermo. So now that, before maybe in the past, it was better to be in Messina because we didn't travel with planes before, but just train. But now, of course, the city of Catania and Palermo are kind of more international because of this, because the presence of the airport. So what would be amazing to have in Messina is to have an airport that will change totally the face of the city.
I think so, but I think part of what I'm after here is that I want our listeners to understand this very special environment you grew up in, with people commonly making references to the recent past, which is to say 1908, and to the ancient past, that people I know from Messina know of the legends of the past, know the stories of the Greeks and the Romans and the warriors and the gods and the mythology and so on. And it's kind of like talking to someone who lives in fables rather than in the news. And it's a very special thing in Messina that I would never discuss this with you, but that's one of the things I love there, is that it's like talking to Plato, to Cicero. It's a
Yeah, we
very,
have
it's a
very
very special experience.
philosophers, like
Yeah,
a
I know that.
philosophic way to face also tragedies,
Yeah.
in a way. Yeah, yeah.
So as a little boy, did you understand yourself to be part of that heritage? And when,
Yeah, I mean, I have uh, the fortune to have my grandparents, and one of them was born in 1896. So he was, present during the World War II, World War
mm,
II, and also the earthquake. So he was a very cultural person. My grandfather's last name was Cicala, Giuseppe Cicala. He was a surgeon. So at the time, so he was working as a surgeon, but also he could speak Latin and Greek perfectly. He was also playing the violin, and he was a tenor. He told me that he has the same voice of Beniamino Gigli. I don't know that because whether not recorded, but he was this kind of Renaissance man who could do everything from science to art. And until his last days, that he died when he was 99 years old,
mm,
he was studying like crazy. He was studying every day. I remember when I was studying at school, I was studying history. I was going just to him, like, no, can you explain to me the medieval? And he was starts talking. I was taking notes, and I was super prepared because of him. And that was for me the source of everything. So whenever I want to know something about the past, also the stories he was telling me, there were stories from the operas, from the tragic. So I think I was lucky to have him in the family. Then that he was actually a symbol of the old Messina. That was he was telling me that in that Messina at that time, they were every Saturday and Sunday, without a TV or a movie, they were going together to play the quartet of Rigoletto, or they were played string quartets. So that was their way to have fun in the weekend. And he was continuously doing this in a different way, like putting like an opera on TV. Or so whenever we were going to visit him, that was, of course, as you know, as an Italian family, you had to go to the main patriarch, in this case, it was my nonno. We were always have an activity in the afternoon that was a cultural activity, of watching a movie, but also some operas, or listen to some music. So it was always connected with a cultural event
mhm.
next to him. Mm.
I'm glad we're discussing all this, because it's not what people think of, unfortunately, about Italy, about Sicily. They may think that, you hear something on the radio and you can sing La Donna Mobile, but the depth of culture in many Italian families is something rather remarkable. And it goes back in a way to, and I'm switching gears here, to humanism. And you recently, February 16th, if I remember, in New York, and sadly I was unable to attend. One of your operas, you've written, I believe, 7 operas. One place I saw 5, one place I saw 7, let's say 7. One of your 7 operas is called Furiosis, and it is an expansion, let's say, from Ludovico Ariosto's Orlando Furioso, which was a series of cantos. We are told that Ariosto coined the term humanism. It's not that he coined the concept of humanism, because that came from the ancient Greeks, from the Romans, from, frankly, what you grew up with
Mm.
as, a boy in the second half of the 20th century, but living with all of this antiquity and Renaissance thought. I mean, we go back to Socrates, we know thyself, we go back to Aristotle, and that the human element is the springboard for a lot of creativity and morals It's not anti-religion, but it's not that divinity is the source of all behavior and morals. My favorite, Epicurus, who who believed in living well, not in a hedonistic way, but living well as an art. And I think it's called I always forget this word, eudaimonia. It's a Greek word that basically means the art of living well, living mindfully, acknowledging your senses, acknowledging the pleasure that the world can present us, and then doing something with it. And then there was Petrarca, who did humanitarian studies, rhetoric. I wrote it down, this rhetoric, moral philosophy, poetry, and grammar were his instructions on what to study to be a proper humanistic human being, even if it was Ariosto who coined the term. And then we came to Ariosto, who was born in Reggio Emilia, but his family was from Ferrara in 1474, and he died in 1533. And he wrote 3 versions of Orlando Furioso, first in 1516 and a couple of more up to 1532. So with that as a bit of a preface, Roberto, talk about how you came to the topic of composing Furiosis, inspired by Orlando Furioso. You're
Yes.
tackling what is, for the most non-Italians know nothing about Ariosto,
But
but most Italians who have gone to school
Ariosto,
at
you
all,
had to understand Ariosto for sure. You had to say he's from he was born in Reggio Emilia, but he was in Ferrara. In Ferrara, in the 15th centuries, there was this huge family, la famiglia degli Este, no?
Isabella d'Este.
And then it was like Monteverdi for the Gonzaga family was hired to write operas and lots of madrigals. The same was for Ariosto, but he was not a musician. He was a writer. So he wrote a poem to make the family like enjoy the story. And this poem is full of stories. Everybody who knows opera, of course, knows Orlando, knows Alcina. So there are many operas that are written by this topic. So with this Furiosus, our idea, mine and the librettist is Flora Gagliardi, was to write an opera who could tell the story of all the characters that are inside the Furiosus, the Orlando Furioso. So, and we did it in a very nice way. There was one of the characters, Astolfo, that represent in a way the storyteller, like Ariosto itself, is the channel who connect all the story inside this Furiosus. And in this way, we could tell the stories of characters that are very different. They represent one particular emotion, but also a location. We have Astolfo on the moon, the Brandimarte who fight in Lampedusa, that is a Sicilian island. So we have also I Carolingi that are like in French. So we speak about Asia, we speak about Africa. The Orlando Furioso is majestic in this way. You know, it's really a geographic story. But universal, because he's the first man who arrived to the moon. He's actually speaking about going to the moon with a hippogriff, that is this magical creature that is with the head of a bird, but is like a horse, flying horse. So
first we have the man and the fish, and then we have the bird and the horse.
all the hybrid there. But what I was, to write this opera for was like to write a dream, because there is not a real story, a real plot. It's more close your eyes and imagine what Ariosto was imagining. So it was beautiful and a beautiful experience. And this performance that happened at the Merkin Hall had amazing singers, an amazing conductor is Robert Scarcella, and it was like very magical night in a way. It would be nice to see staged this performance with kind of super.
Let me ask, because unfortunately I had to miss that, and it broke my heart that I had to miss it because I live very close by, but I couldn't come. I know that the cantos There were 40 in the original and then 46 ultimately by Ariosto in Orlando Furioso, are in what's called ottava ritma, which is an 8-line stanza. Did you and your librettist adhere to that either musically or narratively?
The ottava rima was, I mean, it was already, if you read Ariosto, you know that was sung. I mean, when you read that, somebody was singing that for sure. It was not, it was music inside. No, we decided to have a language that was not really super modern, but it could simplify in a way all the story. We had to reduce and also select some parts that were more important. There is not something that's more important, but we had to choose some part that we could bring. So from the libretto point of view, is more narrative than with a really poetic sense. There are some poetic part for sure, but the metric there is not typical like a Da Ponte libretto or Ariosto itself.
This was produced before in Italy, if I'm correct.
Yes,
and what I want to get to is, as I mentioned at the start of our conversation, you are a professor, clinical professor, at the Casa Italiana Zerilli Marimo, which is the Italian department of New York University, headed by Dr. Stefano Albertini, who is a Renaissance man in his way. He studied in Parma. He understands and appreciates good food. He understands culture. He's a great expert on Italian cinema, on Dante. He and I once did a class about Dante and opera, and Machiavelli, of course. And the Casa itself was founded by this very enlightened woman named the Baroness Mariuccia Zerilli Marimo, who lived a good long life, 89 years. And in her view, what she created with this Casa Italiana in 1990, November 13th, 1990, was a place that was about bringing modern Italian culture, ancient Italian culture, the diversity of Italian culture. I understand that my series on opera was the first one because she loved opera. But there has been a whole expression of the diversity of Italy. Politicians come there of all stripes from left to right. And it's very much sort of a forum of Italian culture, but it's also within the building a place where instruction happens. And you are a professor there, and it's a beautiful villa on 12th Street in New York City in Greenwich Village. Talk about the Casa from your point of view. It's very special.
Stefano, who is the director of the Casa Italiana, want to always not just to the neighborhood but all over like Manhattan, want to show all the Italians event, connect with what you say, not just music but also literature, movie and art. We have also lots of in the entrance there is also a gallery that we present to everybody, but also we have an auditorium that is downstairs where you do of course your adventure with the Italian opera, and with a piano that was donated by one of the members, that is Paolo Martino. And also we always have parties connected with the department. So Casa Italiana is also helping the Italian department to have guests coming, speaking with the student, and is maybe in your department we have lots of the Deutsche House, the French house and everything, and I think the Italian house, thanks to the Baronessa, is the most beautiful one. It's the real casa, like we know it, we always call it. I am also the composer in residence on La Casa Italiana. They make this not just a casa, but a castle. So the idea to have also in the casa a composer in residence is like make more precious in a way. And the Furiosos were actually a production of the Casa Italiana, And Stefano came to see the opera in Città della Pieve in Umbria when it was presented the first time, and he really liked the opera, and he decided like we had to do this in New York. So after the day after the pandemic, finally this dream became reality. So we could actually perform the opera thanks to Stefano, thanks to the Baroness, also to New York.
I mentioned this because I want listeners all around the world. I should know the website by
To
now. It's
come to the
Casa
country.
Italiana NYU. Is it .edu.org? I think it's .org. Casa Italiana NYU.
Education, yeah.
.edu. Okay. And because there are all kinds of things happening. And during the pandemic, this is really Stefano's initiative, and the technical genius Julian Sachs created so much education. Stefano happened to be in Italy when the pandemic hit, and he's from Lombardy, which was the most severely affected region, and he was completely under lockdown. And yet he and Julian and other people in the Casa created so much programming that was seen all around the world, when frankly, most of the world kind of shut down. And there was this initiative on the part of the Casa to bring Italy to the world through the website. And I think it was a remarkable achievement that has not really gone, it's not merited the attention that it deserves in terms of everything. Every day there were films and discussions and art, and Stefano would take his Walkman, not Walkman, I don't even know what the technology is. He would go out with his phone, his iPhone, I guess, and travel around the city and talk about the city and show Florence or Parma or Bozzolo or
empty Florence,
Mantua, empty Florence. And Stefano would do these very learned walks through the cities and explain, and this archive of culture in tough times frankly made me think of, and you know this very well, Boccaccio and the Decameron, in which people from Florence went up in the hills to Fiesole and basically told stories to live out the pandemic that was affecting Florence in the Middle Ages. And Stefano and others at the Casa took inspiration about this and basically made a modern Decameron, not as sexy maybe,
yes,
but nonetheless, to me, it really represented the Italian capacity. It's a term that only exists in Italian, estro, E-S-T-R-O, which is basically when you are handed a tough situation, you rely on your instincts, on your knowledge, on your preparation to create something beautiful out of chaos, to create something meaningful out of disaster. And so much of Italian art, I hate to say that, after earthquakes, after wars, after fires, after Rome being destroyed by Vandals, Italy is a series of invasions and natural disasters from which the Italians rise up and create something more beautiful and more meaningful. And it's not the only country like that, but I think more than any other country, there is that. So I mention this to you because you're an Italian.
I mean, that's is also, we are speaking about the pandemic. That was a terrible thing, but also we had to reinvent ourselves. We found ourselves also with a lots of time that we didn't know we had, and so like Stefano did with the Casa Italiana, and also I found myself very creative. I think about when we were kids, there was not all these TV and iPhones, and we were bored. And that's the moment we were like enjoying ourselves, finding something to do, writing stories like happened in the Decameron, or for me, an example was to write music, to invent shows. So I think this moment of stop that we have in our life he make us like to reset everything and to think in a different way. And of course, we have technology that help us that we didn't have in the past. But now this technology, if we are smart, we can use in the right way, like we are doing today. Maybe this Zoom interview for sure was not going to happen before the pandemic. So now that we know and we learn this tool, we can do it also today.
Well, Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio was born April 24th of 2020. Very specifically, it was my response, in effect. And it became a tradition that I love to do. And I've done it every Friday with the help of my wonderful engineers, especially Johan in Berlin. And it's something that I look forward to. It's my new creative project. And yes, I co-wrote a book in this period that recently came out. But I think we are going to look back on this era and wonder what art and what creativity and what social and human change happened, what we learned from this period. You also created an opera with someone who's a mutual friend of ours, Mark Campbell. Mark was on this program toward the beginning of Fred Plotkin on Fridays. He is the Metastasio of our times. He's
for sure
the most produced and most admired librettist, and with good reason. And he loves Italian food and wine, especially the wine. And did he come to you? Did you go to him? How was the opera A Sweet Silence in Cremona born?
Okay, this opera is it was born from a true story that happened in Cremona. It was actually a lockdown that was not connected with the pandemic, but it was a lockdown of a mayor. They were doing some recording of some Stradivari's important violins in the museum.
Explain why Cremona, the violins and all of that. Why
Cremona is the birth of the violin in a way. And all the Luther, all the violin makers are in Cremona. And of course is the birthplace, I think, from many artists that make violin, like Stradivari's and also other musicians, also
and Claudio Monteverdi, the father.
Claudio Monteverdi is from Cremona. He moved to Mantua, but then he was actually from Cremona. Even Ponchielli, but it's another story. Yeah. And the story is about this.
And Mina, talk about Mina for a second.
Mina, yes, Mina is
sort of the Barbra Streisand of Italy, the great, iconic, popular singer, legendary. Yeah.
La Tigre di Cremona, I think it was called, the tiger.
Or I thought she was the panther of Cremona. Anyway.
Yes, we have to check that. One
She's
of
a big cat.
A big cat of Cremona. The story is like about this true story. The New York Times was fascinated by the story of the lockdown of to order silence in an entire city. So this journalist wrote an article in the New York Times, and Mark Campbell, the librettist, read the article, and he was fascinated. And he wrote to me a text message. He said, Roberto, I think this is amazing opera, like a comic opera to do, because for a New Yorker, it would be impossible to be in silence. But not in the city of Cremona. This is a very quiet city, actually. And from there, I start to laugh at it. It's impossible. How can you write an opera about silence? It will be impossible. But then he explained to me the story, the plot, and everything. And then we proposed the opera. And there were a few companies like the Center of Contemporary for Contemporary Operas, and also the Casa Italiana, and NYU in Florence. Also, they were interested to produce this project. So then the Teatro in Cremona, so the main city where the story is about, decided to produce the opera. And we were lucky enough to have this production last fall. Of a story of that take place in the city of Cremona and present in the theater of Cremona.
The Teatro Ponchielli?
El Teatro Ponchielli, yes,
Yeah,
it's a beautiful, beautiful theater.
yeah.
They want to redo the opera next fall. They just told me like a few days, it is a moment. So next fall they want to do again. So it's like the opera of the city that they want to do every year. And it was beautiful to work with Mark. As a comic opera was a lot of collaboration, of course, and also lots of funny moments that happened during the creation of the opera. Yeah.
So Furiosos is in Italian, A Sweet Silence in Cremona is in
In
English.
English, yes.
You as a composer, you're not the first Italian to do this. There was Menotti. Composing music for different languages. Verdi did it in French and Italian. Stravinsky did it in different languages.
Yes.
But what are the aesthetic guidelines or rules that change when you go from one language to the next as a composer?
The language inspired the music for sure, and we know that Carmen that is not sung in English is different. The opera is very influenced by the language for sure. And of course, when I write an opera in Italian, for me it's more natural. It's my language. I grew up with that. I can feel the sound of everything. So to write in English, I need always a reader, like somebody can read with emotion the text, and this happened with Mark, also with my husband that is American. I asked him to read in a way that I can feel the language more. So for when I write music from with a English libretto, for sure I need this kind of second layer. So I need to feel with another soul what is the text that I cannot instinctively. I can understand. I can, but I cannot give the same length. I don't say in the word. You know, I need to have a little element that I cannot find as an Italian.
Even where the accent and emphasis would be in a word.
The accent for sure, the stress, that's something that is
crucial in the creation of the music.
Yes.
So you mentioned NYU in Florence, and people watch this program in Italy a lot. Talk about what NYU in Florence is, because many American universities have branches in Italy, mostly in Florence and Rome and a few other places. I purposely avoided all of those and went to Bologna because, for many reasons, but it seemed to me that that was where I would get my best preparation for opera. But Florence, for most American students, is about being in the city, about seeing the art, about speaking English and a little Italian. But NYU in Florence is outside the city. It's a very different place. Talk about the program.
In the Via Bolognese, that is a via that connects, like a very it's not a highway, so it's a very small street that connects Florence to Bologna. And it's like maybe 15 minutes from the center of the city, and the campus is in a villa that is actually there are 5 villas in one singular place. So it's in the Toscan Hill, one of the most beautiful places with a view of Florence. There is the oldest villa is from the 15th centuries and is actually a museum. And then there are other villas that were built just a few centuries after, and that represent a dorm, or also the place where the students have classes, or the master degrees are they have the conference. So in different villas you have different things. Plus in the center now there is a there was a swimming pool because there was an old villa. Instead of a swimming pool, now they built an amphitheater. And in the amphitheater, you have lesson of theaters and also performance of theaters. And the opera that actually I performed was performed in this theater outside. And is the best place also for to learn the history of Italy from the Renaissance, from the medieval, because the student, they go into the city, they see everything in front of them. But it's inside the villa, there are some courses of gardening, like history of gardens, like more landscaping and everything. So because the second biggest garden in Florence after the Boboli is actually at the Villa La Pietra, the student can go there to see La Limonaia, the lemons, and also all the other trees. And there is also a natural theater inside the garden, so they can have also shows there. And it's a totally experience. I go there to teach in the summer, where there is a small group of students, like it's not the student that you have usually in the spring and the fall. So we know each other like perfectly. It's like a big family, and we always connect very well with all the other teacher. We create also in interdisciplinary, say interdisciplinary, so lesson between like professor, and to go there in June and July is really magical. So it's beautiful. The place is
And
beautiful.
do you teach in Italian or English or both?
I teach in English because I teach history of opera there. So we go to Maggio Musicale Fiorentino. We went also to Comunale di Bologna. Often we go to Parma to see some performance, and this is an amazing experience for the students. And we invite singers in class. It's very easy because the opera became really alive during the summer in Italy. With Arena di Verona and everything. It looks like everybody's moving around. It's not like in the winter, they stay 1 month in one theater and they don't move. But in the summer, it's super alive, super beautiful.
It's true. So it was important to say that because I want people to understand the context of your life and your creativity. But I want to move to a couple of other points before we conclude. We've been talking about your operas, but you have written 2 piano concertos, 5 piano sonatas, 3 ballets, movie scores, choral music, chamber music, and if I'm correct, music to be performed by children.
Yes.
And therefore, you follow in the line of Mozart and Tchaikovsky and Richard Strauss, that you're not just an opera composer, you're not just a symphonic or a chamber composer. You compose in all media, and like Prokofiev, film music. How do I know you get commissions, of course, but how does the inspiration come that you decide what your next piece might be? That would it be a piano work? Would it be something for children? A film score would be a commission. Would it be another opera?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yes, it's actually a great question. Of course, you are famous for great questions. But what personally happened to me is that I'm a pianist. I was born as a pianist. I was doing some concerts at the beginning. Then I had to change my career in a different way. But so I write on the piano. So my instrument is the piano. I wake up in the morning, or like before going to bed, I have a moment of inspiration, like everybody, every writer, anybody can have. When I sit down at the piano, I start to have the first idea that is coming from my soul. Is coming. It's not that I'm thinking about C major, C minor, or like the decaphonic harmony and everything. I just, my hand, very physical. My hand are playing. And that idea decide after a few minutes, I am a quartet, I am a piano concerto, I am a theme of a very famous opera. It's like Pinocchio, you know, the story of Pinocchio, a piece of wood, and Geppetto, this is going to be my son. So the same thing happened to me. And this happened with the piano concerto. I was just writing down, this is a piano concerto. I cannot do anything else than a piano concerto. Like this happened with the piano sonata or with an aria, because if the melody is so singable, is so strong, it cannot be something else than an aria or a piece for to be sing. Yeah, so that's mainly the answer.
Um, did you set, I mean, obviously each one of these forms requires a different talent and a different approach. Obviously, if you're doing a ballet, you have to think in terms of the choreography. Well, let's talk about how you approach writing ballet music,
Yeah,
which
yeah. The ballet is more the rhythm than the choreography because
Mhm.
I cannot tell the choreographer what to do. For Constellation, that is actually one of the ballet that I wrote. It was actually represented. I create is a connection of constellation. So you have I have the Ursa Minor, Ursa Major, and the Orion, all the character of the constellation. For this reason, I think about individual dancers who can approach with a piece at the end that can be a piece with all the musicians. So usually you speak with the choreographer about what is the idea of the choreography. If you want solo dancers or if it was a chorus, like ensemble. And the structure is mostly for there.
Mhm.
Of course, then I imagine, but I cannot share what I imagine to the choreographer. I like interpretation. I will never say, now you have to do that. The same with, when I write a piece of music and I have a conductor playing an orchestra piece, I give some instruction, of course, and but I think the most beautiful part is to sit down and listen the interpretation.
Mhm.
And I will like it for sure because I already write a lot about what I want, and they will add something or take out something and to make the piece more beautiful. Like this happened, with the Furiosos, the Merkin Hall, for sure. I saw an interpretation that made the music more beautiful in a way.
Um, I am a big lover, as millions of people are, of the writing, the work of the great African American writer Toni Morrison, who was the first African American woman to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. And when I, as a writer, I would never say I'm anywhere near that, but I study great writers, study her. Part of her creative process was that she would program her writing time because she was an editor, she was a professor, she raised two children, and therefore had a busy real life that she had to be involved with. You have a similar thing, that you have
Mhm.
responsibilities, you're in a marriage, you are expected to produce work, you have to follow your students and so on. How does your time management interact with the creative moments when they come, that
Mm.
you you
Yes,
may not be free at the moment that the
it's not,
creative
yeah, it's not easy, but I can tell you that I am very productive when I'm very, very busy. I don't know, what's happened to me, but when I really had lots of things to do, like teaching, cheating, I had to write something, but this is the moment where I became really productive. It's like that I use that 5 minutes, the hour that I can use only to write my music. I use that 200%. And when I have the entire day where I can finally sit down and write the music that I had to write, I don't do it. I don't do the same way that I usually, in that hour that I steal from my day, I write very well. So I'm not the best example. I'm not very organized in that. I can tell you, when I have the inspiration, there is no night, no day, no, like I have no time to rest. Yes, because I want to do that. For me, the joy is to write. So in that moment, and I have to finish the piece as soon as possible. I cannot keep it in my mind because I will be crazy. So I have to arrive at a point, okay, until it's not done, I cannot sleep, I cannot eat, so I have just to finish everything.
And your husband understands that in effect
Yes.
you
He
need to be
used to,
left alone?
he's a performance as well, he's a
Okay.
singer.
Right.
So he can understand when I have this moment of,
Yeah.
and then as you know, also my brain is full of music, so I have no space for anything else. I forget my keys, I forget, everything. I cannot. So when I have in that process, I disappear from the world and then I come back 100%. So he knows that.
Something I learned a long time ago, and then it was confirmed to me reading Toni Morrison's Process, and other people too, of course, is that you have to be open to your creative moment whenever that happens. And I, for my whole life, even as a kid, have kept a notepad next to my bed, because if I wake up, and something is happening, I have to put it down right away while it's still fresh and while the right terms are there. For many years in my previous apartment, I had a shower that had a board on it with I could write on it, and it would
Actually,
not.
I do have that.
You have that, and because the title of one of my books came to me while I was taking a shower, and I wrote "Recipes from Paradise: Life and Food on the Italian Riviera," and it stayed up there in the shower for weeks because I'm a clean man. Every time I would take a shower, I would look at that and think about, what do I mean by recipes from paradise? And it can be very antisocial. I remember many years ago, 1993, I was in Santa Fe. I was working at the opera, and suddenly I had a writing idea. And I just said, I'm sorry. And I went off to a hill, and I had a legal pad, and I just started writing everything. This is pre-computers and all that. We had computers, but not that I would take with me. And I just wrote out the structure of a whole book right there in a very long day, drinking coffee on a hill in Santa Fe. And then I came back and I said, I'm sorry, but I had the creative moment, and they understood. They understood.
It
And
is, everybody will understand that.
yeah, well, not everybody does, actually.
I record myself, like if I am in the middle of the street and I start to sing a melody that I think that is the melody, I record it. Yeah. So taking notes is kind of the same. Yeah.
So final question, which may have come at the beginning, but I'm going to put it at the end. Another thing you have in common with me, and I with you, is that we both studied music, opera in Bologna.
It's true.
Now, you are from Sicily. Palermo has a wonderful conservatory. Naples, close by, has a wonderful conservatory. And yet you went further north to Bologna. Why did you do that?
In Bologna happened because of the dams that you know. So I want to do
DAMS is Dipartimento di Arte,
Arte,
Musica e
Musica e
Spettacolo,
Spettacolo,
where I studied before you. Yeah.
Yes, and I studied music.
Yeah.
I had this big passion of music analysis. Actually, I also won a competition for music analysis when I was studied in Bologna. And in Bologna, there were some very, very good instructor and musician there that were teaching analysis. Plus, I moved to the conservatory in Bologna.
Martini.
Martini, yes. So I studied also the Conservatory Martini composition there the last years. And this happened. It was very shocking for me to go from Sicily to Bologna because it was totally different world. More shocking than from Bologna to New York, where I saw more Sicilians. in New York than in Sicily, and the ocean, the sea was like more home than Bologna. The fog, the language of the dialect is very different from.
Very different.
I loved it. I had the best
vowels. Because you're obviously you speak better Italian than I. Try to do a Bolognese vowel.
The vowel.
Vowel.
The more than the vowel are the S sound, the sh.
Permesh. On the bus, the Bolognese woman would say to me, permesso signore si scende qui. In other words,
Yes,
permesso signore si scende qui. In other words, excuse me, sir, are you getting off here?
But the accent is beautiful, you can understand, but also words like il tiro, il rusco. So there are words that we use for trash or for to open the door, so ring bell, that are not the same words that we use in Italian language, of course, in Sicilian as well. So
what I meant by the vowels is Pavarotti was from Modena, he was nearby, but he could do this. Instead of saying casa, they would say casa. There was be sort of a doubling of the vowel.
Very relaxed, ways to speak.
Signore, and it goes into the music. That's what I mean. Because I learned my Italian in
every
Bologna.
dialect has its own music.
Yeah,
That's sure. Yeah,
it's a very musical speech and very open. But as someone who came from Sicily, talk about Bolognese food, and then
I had the best.
you have to
I
go
learned
teach.
how to cook the best bolognese because my neighbors, Nella, la signora Nella, she actually saw that I was cooking, and she invited her to her apartment, and she showed me how to make tagliatelle, lasagna, and ragu, and I was staying in her apartment like hours and hours to watch her cooking. So I will always be thankful for people from Bologna to be so open about sharing.
That's how I learned. They're very open. Also, the food markets to me are the best in the world. And I learned a vocabulary, a language, a musical language of food there, because the knowledge is so deep about every ingredient, about how to pair things. I learned this from market people, and in addition to the first pension I lived in was Signora Bovini, which is Mrs. Cows, C-O-W-S, cows, bovines, and on Via Farini. But it's a whole culture unto itself. Where you studied, Mozart and Rossini studied composing.
Sure, yes.
It's a remarkable, right, it's a remarkable history. It's the oldest university in the world. It has the Teatro Comunale is older than La Scala. And Bologna now is acquiring a reputation about its food finally, but that shouldn't be enough. It has Michelangelo's in its churches. It has, to me, the most exciting piazza in Italy, the Piazza Maggiore.
Yeah,
the people are extraordinary in Bologna. And I'm not saying this is a commercial.
No, so it's actually
La dotta, la grassa, la rossa.
La rossa,
The
so la
wines,
dotta for sure.
the fat, the red. But I'm saying this because to me, it's the Italian city that best expresses so much about Italy. There are places with better museums, there are places that may be prettier. Bologna has no sea, it has terrible weather. It doesn't matter. There's just something.
But a sunny day in Bologna is the most beautiful gift. Like
it
when
is.
you get the sun, the sky is so blue. The towers, the two towers are so three-dimensional.
It's a medieval city, but unlike Florence, which is sort of gray, Bologna is red. The architecture, and it's a very different look.
And it's just 100 kilometers, like because of the mountain, and the two cities, Florence and Bologna, are for food, for culture, for language. They're so different.
Yeah,
make like magic Italy, I think, for this. Two cities that are so close and so different between each others.
Well, even Parma and Reggio Emilia are 22 kilometers apart. And they made the same cheese, Parmigiano Reggiano. They couldn't be more different. Ariosto was from Reggio Emilia, Parma, Verdi, Toscanini. Italian culture is so deep. It's not a thing of the past only. You are Italian culture. You represent it. You carry it forward. And the reason I wanted you as my guest today is because I want people to know what Italy produces today, that it's not a museum nation. It's a very active, creative, cultural nation, Roberto, and you are a big part of it. And I know that you have to go teach now.
I am.
So, grazie.
Grazie, Fred.
Keep up the good work.
To talk with you.
And I will see you soon. And listeners, look up Roberto Scarcella Perino. There are his works on Adagio, and you can discover his music and some of what he does. Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you. Grazie.
Ciao.
Ciao.